Hey folks, you know I take my trail camera intel pretty seriously. It's a huge part of how I build my hunting strategy, and I'm always looking for gear that just flat out works. Stuff I can rely on. Backed by solid people and the best customer support in the business. That's exactly why I run Tactacam Reveal cell cameras. Whether you're just getting started or you're a full-blown data junkie like me, they've got a camera to fit your budget and your hunting style. My go-to currently is the Reveal 3.0 series with fully integrated GPS. These things are dead simple to set up. Less fiddling, more scouting and hunting. And they run on most major service providers and will automatically connect you to the strongest signal in your area. So no more hiking to the top of a ridge just to realize you've got the wrong service provider. Been there, not fun. Here's the kicker. You don't even need an SD card. That means fewer trips in, less pressure on your spots, and more real-time intel sent straight to your phone. And if you pair it with a Reveal solar panel or a lithium cartridge, you can keep those cameras running longer and spend more time doing what actually matters. Scouting new ground, dialing in a setup, or maybe, just maybe, finally cleaning the garage like you told your wife you would before the season started. Don't just take my word for it. Check out Tactacam Reveal at Tactacam.com. Tactacam. Everything you need to take your hunting to the next level. Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Oscio gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Oscio's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Oscio. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. If you're like me, e-scouting isn't just part of the process, it is the process. And nobody's doing it better than Spartan Forge. This is a veteran-owned company that built the only science-based scouting platform on real GPS collar data and artificial intelligence to predict deer movement. But where it really shines is with their imagery. Spartan Forge now has a high-res UAV coverage for 80% of the whitetail states, down to 5-centimeter detail. That means you can see trails, old logging roads, cuts, even subtle vegetation changes that most apps completely miss. And if you really want to get nerdy, their LiDAR layer breaks right through the canopy so you can see the forest floor. Gives you some visibility to those hidden draws, ditches that big bucks absolutely love to live in. Add in historical wind data and a desktop-only features like Eagle Eye and Cyber Scout, and you've got the most advanced hunting app out there. Start your risk-free 14-day trial today at spartanforge.ai. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Tactacam Reveal Cellular Cameras. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 477. And today I'm joined by my buddy, Chad Sylvester, and we're digging into a question that a lot of us are thinking, but probably don't say out loud. Has modern hunting become watered down? So stay tuned. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And true to form, man, we've been pretty accurate with this, dude. I got my buddy, Mr. Chad Sylvester, on to do our once a month CNC session, CNC Music Factory. Wasn't that like a thing back in the 90s or something? Wasn't it some like really shitty?
Dude. Yeah, Marky Mark. No, that's a different band. I was going to say Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, but
that's different. I didn't listen to that. Apparently you did, but it's okay. Is that what you guys listen to when you were a rodeo? And there's some Marky Mark on
it all, man, you know.
CNC Music Factory. I can't think of a damn song from them, but like, I guess they were pretty popular. You know, probably saw on MTV.
Something like that. Yeah.
I had a song stuck in my head the other day. It was a Skynyrd song, and I don't even know how it got there. And I was humming it, and my wife and I were away this past week on like a little, couple getaway excursion after like the craziness of like, Christmas, New Year's, all that stuff dies down. We usually take a couple of days and just go away to like a resort, get massages, hang out, hot tub, like, decompress. And I'm humming this song, and she's like, "What song is that?" I'm like, I don't remember the name of it now off the top of my head. And I was like, "Oh, it's a Skynyrd song." Because for those people who don't know, Skynyrd is like one of my top 5 favorite bands, like of all time, like no questions asked. Every time I listen to them, I think about getting a Harley, and all I want to do is ride a Harley and like hang out by a campfire and drink cheap beer. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
The
American dream.
I got my new snakeskin boots, which makes it even like more epic. You know what I mean? And she's like, "What song is that?" And I told her what song it was, and she's like, "Damn, that's like a deep cut." She's like, I don't think I know that song." And it's not one of their popular songs, but it's just like one when you hear it, it's just like,
Yeah. It's like Easy Rider magazine, vision, like the hair, like I got long hair and I'm got like a chopper, you know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm envisioning. That's my postseason like dream.
I'm envisioning New Truths from the Stand cover art. Python, snakeskin cowboy boots, long flowing mullet.
Dude, that's where I want to be right now. That's what it's the life I want to live. I should have brought the snakeskin boots in with me to give everyone a peek, but those things are sweet, dude. I strutted them for the first time this weekend when we went out to dinner. It was awesome.
You wore those to dinner?
Hell yeah, dude. I wore those to dinner. Are you kidding me? What do you think? I had them and wasn't going to wear them?
I just thought that was like a posing photo that you just pulled them out of the closet.
I was getting ready to leave for dinner.
Those are real stepping out boots.
Yeah, those are stepping out boots, man. And I was a little worried because it's, the snowy out and I don't want to mess them up. So it's like, they're just like, those are my fancy shoes, man. Like whenever I got something like where if shit's got to go down or I got to get dressed up like this, the Python boots are coming out, Cause so the backstory of that for people who are listening, like my dad, his feet are all messed up from just like years of whatever, he's had like surgeries on his feet and like, or cortisone shots and stuff like that. And he's had these Python skin boots since I was a kid. Like they're probably no lie, like 35 plus years old, like, at least. Right. And so he's had them for forever. And, I was at his house over Christmas, and every year when I see him at the house or whatever, and because he has them in the closet in the basement bedroom, and that's where my wife and I sleep. And so every year I see him, and I always look at him. I took a picture of him the one year and I sent him to you, right? And I had him out there, like when I was back for Christmas. I was just checking him out, and I was like, man, these things are sweet. And he's like, he's like, I'm getting ready to just give them away. He's like, take them to Salvation Army or something. He's like, cause he's like, my feet hurt so bad. He's like, I can't wear them anymore. And he had like 4 different pair of cowboy boots. One was like the Python skin boots that he's had since I was a kid. Then he had another pair of like white alligator skin boots. And then he had another pair of like old Fred, like he's an OG, like he's legit, dude. Like he's got the real shit. And he had 2 other pair that I snagged from him. And I was like, he's like, unless you want them, you can just take them. And my dad didn't wear the same shoe size. And so I was like, well, let me put them on and see if they fit. And I was like, if they do, then I'll take them. And so I took them. And I just been waiting for a chance to wear the Python skin boots somewhere, right? Because they're not like everyday dress. You know what I mean? Like you got to just bust those things out on special occasions. But I told my wife was like, she's like, I don't think I've ever seen your dad wear them. I was like, well, he hasn't worn them in a long time. So his feet have been messed up for a while. I was like, but I've seen my dad wear those boots to a funeral. Like those are like his fancy shoes. I was like, whenever he's got to get dressed up, like he puts the Python skins on, son.
My gosh, dude, I'm gonna start. I don't know, thrift store shopping, flea market shopping, whatever you want to call it, and build you an exotic cowboy boot collection from whatever 1980s.
Dude, right now I got the Python and the white alligator. Now the white alligator ones are special. Like I think I'm actually going to bust those out for, I'm already kind of planning it. I'm going to bust those out for the Harrisburg show. I'm going to rock me some white alligators in Harrisburg.
Let me know how your feet and knees, back feel after 8 hours of that.
Yeah, they're going to be torched. It's going to be terrible. Anyway, hard transition from alligator skin boots. So true to form, Chad and I've been doing these once a month where we take a topic. If you've been listening for a couple months at least, we take a topic that's in the hunting industry or adjacent to and kind of beat it up. Sometimes they're mindset things. Sometimes they're, getting better at something type of things, or maybe just controversial topics, right? And so today's topic that we're going to chop it up on is this idea of, or the question of, is hunting watered down, right? And where this kind of came from, at least from my end, whenever I'm trying to come up with things for Chad and I to talk about that are interesting, is, it's postseason, hunting season's over. So people spend a lot of time hand-wringing over things because probably they don't have anything else to do. Some of it I do think is very appropriate to hand wring over, right? Because I think if you've been paying attention, I know our buddy Andy May has posted a couple different times things with like drones and stuff like that that's going on, like with, I'll say technology, but it's not technology. I think it's just like maybe poor judgment overall by hunters and et cetera, right? Because it's not the technology's fault per se. It's what people are using it for and what they're doing with it and stuff like that. And, it made me start to think, after seeing some of that, some of those posts and things like that, and Byron Horton does too. Like he does a good job of kind of like, when people are doing stupid shit, he's not afraid to kind of say, hey, these people are doing some stupid shit. But it made me kind of think, are we really watering down hunting in general, right? The hunting experience or whatever that means, right? But when I kind of started thinking about it a little bit, I think when we throw around these terms, like there's never any, consensus, if you will, around what watering down is. And it's like, are we actually even asking the right questions to decide whether we think hunting's being watered down or not, right? And so I guess like for me first, like when you think of watering down hunting, like let's just pretend that that's a truth or that's exists, right? Or it exists to some degree, right? Let's just pretend for the sake of argument that that's the case. How would you define that in your life or in your perspective? And like, maybe you can look at it from like how you define it personally, like what would water down your experience, right? And then maybe think like beyond that and think like, if I was the king of hunting, right? This is how I would think like it would be watered down, because you and I have very specific ways we like to hunt. We like things to kind of be hard. Like those are just things we enjoy, right? But that's not necessarily for everybody. And just because someone doesn't enjoy the hard hunt doesn't necessarily mean that their hunt is watered down per se, right? So I think there's two different perspectives to have there.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good preface to the conversation of being able to look at this through a couple of different lenses, right? But I think for me personally, when I think about things being watered down, it's less flavorful. Like I'm getting less from that experience, whatever that is, by the lens that I'm looking through it. I think for me, there are things that have been kind of watered down from an experience perspective. I think that it relates to some of the repetitive content that I consume, and kind of the cultural, societal, socioeconomic narrative that the content has, like the underlying tone to that content, I guess. And I think that perspective for me probably comes from just the last 10 years of business, of like being in a business that is, whitetail centric. We're monetizing the whitetail ecosystem in a multitude of ways. So I think for me, that watered down some of what I think about whitetail hunting. But purely from a hunting aspect, it really hasn't been watered down for me, because I control that narrative, right? Like I'm not dependent on the ecosystem or the marketplace or, social media or, content. I have complete 100% control, and I dictate what I'm getting from whitetail hunting. So from that aspect, it hasn't been watered down. But then also I'll take another lens, like the lens of a new hunter or folks just getting into hunting. And you brought up the technology thing, which I think is kind of the derivative of what this conversation kind of stems from.
It's where a lot of people go first. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it's the easy out, right? Like, hey, we have all these new fancy tools. Like, how is this changing hunting? And I think that there is some truth to that. And there's conversations that I've had with new hunters that you can tell that what I'm getting from hunting. So let's compare it. First 3 years of hunting for Chad, first 3 years hunting for Clint, first 3 years hunting for Joe Smith. I think that's probably very, very different for all three of us. Not just from a personality standpoint, because I think you can grab like three type A personality guys, put them in different eras of whitetail hunting, mid 90s, early 2000s, 2020, 2021, whatever. And I think those are three very different experiences for similar people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting, when you said new hunter, like I wrote that down because I think, well, let me back up for a second. I think if I take the lens of just me, I don't think my experience has been watered down necessarily, but I make a conscious effort just in the way I do things in general to not let it be watered down. Like I want the full richness of things, right? Like at least at first, right? Because I want to figure out what I might need to take away or supplement, right? To kind of give me the experience that I want. And so I kind of jump into things and I want all the pain associated with it at first, because I want to kind of understand like, what is this thing? So, the juxtaposition is jiu-jitsu. I didn't just like, I'm going to train a little bit. I was like, nope, I'm going to train 4 or 5 days a week and I'm going to get the shit beat out of me because I want to feel and know what this thing is like. Like this weekend, for example, I'm going to head and train with a guy who's, in the UFC, right? Because I got an invite, I'm going to get the piss beat out of me, right? And I know that going into it, but I want the smoke. Like I want to know what it's like to be lock up with someone who is elite at things, right? And so for hunting, for me, it's the same thing. Like I want to do the thing that's like, seems like it's the hardest and the most rewarding if you're successful and you're going to learn the most from and stuff like that. And so I think sometimes new hunters, I think for them, it's like they might be looking for a softer entrance. And I think you have to think about how different people kind of enter, right? Like some people just want to get they just want to taste. I'm like, I want my mouth bloodied. That's my approach to things, is just jump in both feet, right? Some people, that's not what they want, right? They want a little bit more of a ease their way into things. And so I think, I don't want to say you have to give them the watered down experience, but you have to be able to bring them along kind of stepwise in ways that are not off-putting, if that's one way to kind of say it, right? And then I think when you think about technology and when we think about watering down something, to your point, people immediately go there. And I don't think that it's like watering it down isn't necessarily anti-technology or anti-content or whatever the case is. It's certainly not anti-new hunter, because I think you need things in place to help them kind of get acquainted, because we don't live in the same way we lived 20, 30 years ago, where people just had access to things out their back door and they could just come home from work and jump in. They probably don't own a back 40 and they probably don't have a piece of public that's right out their back door either. Like that's most people who want to get into hunting. So it's not anti those things. I think where you start to water it down is when you, at least whenever you have gained a little bit of like knowledge, right? Or you've kind of surpassed the new hunter realm, so to speak, right? And then you start to actively look to remove friction points, right? Like when your focus turns from learning the craft to reducing the friction, then I think that to me is like when you start to see the beginnings of watering it down, because you no longer have an interest in learning the craft any longer. You just have an interest of like getting to the run through the checkered flag, so to speak, right? And I would equate this to, in a way, to jiu-jitsu. It's like, it's like going and saying like, yeah, I just started jiu-jitsu and I've learned a little bit and, I got a blue belt or whatever. And now it's like, I want to remove all the friction and I want to get to black belt. Right. But you don't get there without the friction, right? Like there is no path without the friction. And to me, hunting's the same way. It's like when you constantly look for silver bullets or cheat codes or whatever, you're just wasting your time. And to me, that's when you start to water down the experience to a degree, because those points of friction are the things that actually develop you and give you the experience that you're ultimately looking for. The experience isn't in the finish line per se. You really shouldn't have a finish line. There shouldn't really be one, right? It should just be kind of honing your craft, so to speak. And then like, if you remove that friction, then I think you reduce your competence, which then reduces your overall kind of experience and your love of that craft,
Yeah.
And then it starts to go away. And then you start to care less about some of the nonsensical things that you see where technology is maybe making a bad inroad, right? Or content is making a bad inroad or whatever. You stop caring about those things so much because, you no longer care. Like the friction, the competence isn't there. So you're not as invested, I guess I should say.
No, yeah, that all makes, I mean, good logical sense to me. I think that, again, I think that you and I probably spoke on this, or maybe this was a different conversation with someone else, but I think that we just need to be careful of what we tell ourselves. And I'll take that a step further in this case. Like, I think that you have to be very careful with your whitetail diet. I'm going to call it a diet because like there's things that you consume mentally. There's things that, well, I guess it's all mentally. I mean, I guess you can consume things, visually, like in the woods. You can hear things from other people, whether that's content or a phone conversation or somebody, in the parking lot bitching about access or whatever the case is. I think that we have to be careful of what we digest. I think we need to add filters in a lot of cases, because when you start to believe some of the narratives, I think that adds to the level of, I think it just greatly affects what that experience and what we get from hunting. It's no different. Like you hang around with a bunch of friends who have bad attitudes, poor attitudes, and they're constantly negative, harping on whatever circumstance that they have. It's like, okay, well, eventually that's going to wear on you to some capacity. Like remove yourself from that environment and get around some different folks. So, yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with it. I think I had an end point in mind, but I think
Well, I mean, you are the sum of what you're consuming or what you're exposed to a degree.
Yeah.
And so, which was leading me actually to my next point was a nice segue, which is, kind of really being honest with ourselves in a way that, and thinking about how has hunting actually changed, right? Measurably for a person, so to speak, right? Like, cause I think there's a little bit of a reality check. I think sometimes rightly we get spun up about certain things, and I think sometimes wrongly we get spun up by certain things to a degree, right? And so let's just think about like where we're at in hunting now, like, not to be negative, but like there's certainly positives about where we're at. We were talking about content. Content can be viewed as a negative, right? But people have so much access, especially when we talk about newer hunters, right? They have so much access to information that people didn't have before. So if you want to learn and have that growth perspective and not necessarily remove all the friction, you've got access to things that can help you actually keep the friction, but be able to overcome it, right? And actually use it, right? To actually get better. There's, just this podcast example, a great example of it is, finding people like you when you and I first met, like guys who like you look at as mentors to kind of help guide you to a degree. It was like, because like really before I met you, like I loved the bow hunt, but like I really wasn't, like the DIY thing hadn't quite bit me yet. And then once you and I kind of met, and I was like, oh man, this guy likes to do hard stuff too. It's like, well, let's just do hard stuff together. Like I found a buddy that was like, yeah, we can kind of enjoy the misery, to a degree together. Right. And that was something that kind of got me excited. And then I think I want to try to figure out how to say this. When I said at the top, like, people were sharing things that they're seeing that kind of sticks in their craw or maybe is, unethical, for example, right? Like, man, I see that stuff just fly around virally, right? And I don't think is bad, right? Because you want to point out the people who are, taking advantage of something, right? Or they found a loophole or something that doesn't serve the greater interest of the resource or whatever. And you'd certainly want to question that stuff. And you certainly want to make sure people are aware that there might be some people out there doing some nefarious stuff, right? But I would also like to see, with the same virility, well, look at that. That's a big word for a Tuesday. I would like to see people sharing people who are doing ethical shit at the same scale, right? Because the way you kind of beat that to a degree, because like you have to wonder sometimes, right? It's that old adage of, man, it seems like the world's crazier than it's ever been. I'm like, I just think we see more of the crazy. I don't think it's that much crazier than it was 20 years ago. I just think we now see in every little nook and cranny of the world, if you want to look at it, you can, right? And so I think a little bit of that is it rampant? it probably happens more than we want it to, right? But is it as rampant as we think it is, or are we just fixated on that part of it? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's a little bit of probably human behavior and the era that we live in of just the speed of information transfer. I mean, that's a lot of what that boils down to. But
yeah,
the question that you asked.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that speed of information transfer, like the thing that made me think of was like, you know, with all the stuff that we talked about, that I kind of talked about some of the positives, like there's obvious like trade-offs for those things, right? Like, you know, you get someone to a learning curve point without like deep understanding of something, right? Or really kind of grasping the thing, right? And then you also start to like, and I think, you know, I try to do a good job on this show of not presenting myself as an expert and trying not to present myself as someone with wisdom versus information, because there's a difference between information and wisdom. I think there are some areas that I've spent enough time doing that I probably have some wisdom, right? In the hunting, in hunting in general, right? There's some areas where there's things that I know or that I think about that I don't share because I feel like I just have information, right? I don't have the context for that someone should really, I'm in no position to tell someone about X, Y, and Z because I'm still working through it myself, right? But there's not a lot of that filter that goes on in the world in general, right? And so that was just the other couple points, like when you started, that made me think of that.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at whitetail hunting and what has changed, it's like everything has changed.
Yeah, I mean, everything and nothing at the same time, almost.
I mean, the culture is, I feel like, has shifted slightly. I mean, obviously technology has changed, and when people say technology, they think trail cameras, they think drones, but it's so much more than that. It's the technology and the boots that you're wearing and the garments that you're wearing. It's the mapping. It's, again, the ability to be informed through educational materials or content. I mean, top to bottom, regulations have changed, weapons have, I mean, everything has changed. What hasn't changed? So I think the ideology is, well, I'm not sure I want to go there. Personally, the ideology behind whitetail hunting has not changed for me. And I want to say that I've probably gone through a progression where it started with family and hunting the family farm, the experience, and you get bit by the bug, and it's like, well, no one else knows what to do. I can't learn from them. I need to go learn from somebody, a mentor, or consume content and go screw up and make mistakes and learn and get better. All the friction points that you mentioned. And now it's starting to come back full circle. It's where it's like, all right, well, I got a 9-year-old that's now wants to hunt. Like, so it's come full circle for me, I guess. But change isn't always bad, right? Like, change can be good. It's, again, like, what lens are we looking through at some of these things? I have a hard time, and this is an internal debate for me on the tech side. And I say tech side, I'm talking, I'll be specific with drones and trail cameras and weapons, technology of weapons, kind of crossbows. Like, that's the hot topic right now, inline muzzle loaders. Right. I mean, we have weapons today that can be used in a primitive season that are way more lethal than what was used 30 years ago in a firearm season. And we're still kind of tracking on that same regulation, season date type thing. Is it good? I don't know. Is it bad? I don't know. You know? And that's the kind of internal battle that I have is, well, it's not the technology. The technology is a tool. It's in an inanimate object without it being in the hands of a hunter, period. Mm-hmm. So it's like, do we blame the tech or do we blame the people? If we blame the people, how are those people influenced? It's like the never ending argument, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's always kind of hard to parse out because the technology, you know, and this episode isn't, the purpose isn't to necessarily harp on technology or anything like that, but it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because it's the place where everyone kind of defaults to go to. I don't know. I think when you mentioned going full circle, I think a lot of people, maybe I shouldn't say a lot. And again, we have a very unique circle of people that we talk with and things like that. And so I hesitate to try to paint with a broad brush whenever I try to categorize something, in the hunting space, because I have to stop and take stock for a moment and say, do I really spend most of my time talking to the everyday hunter? And I would question, does the everyday hunter actually even listen to this show? I would say probably not. I would say the people who listen to this show are ate up as much as you and I are with it for the most part. And then we probably get some everyday hunters that pop in on the show whenever hunting season rolls around, and they're looking to consume some hunting content, right? Some bow hunting content, or they're looking to learn something for the next season or whatever, and they start listening in June. I mean, you can look at the metrics for podcasts, whenever people really are interested and whenever it goes down, right? So I try to hesitate to kind of paint with a broad brush because of that, because our group of friends is so uniquely passionate about this thing, right? We're kind of an echo chamber a little bit, But the thing that I keep kind of coming back to is going back to what you were saying, where it comes full circle. I was like, I'm an example of that, where my day life is very technology driven, et cetera, for what I do for a living. And there was a part of me at a point in time in my hunting journey that I was as much technology as I could use to try to remove friction points for myself, whether it was time, whether it was understanding, whether it was, a piece of content, or whether it was how it could maximize the little bit of time that I had in the field, et cetera, et cetera. I think what happened for me personally is that I got so frustrated with having to manage all of that stuff that I was just like, I just want to make it simple. I just want to go do what every guy can do. Because when you were saying when you said what hasn't changed, and I said, it's funny because the more things change, the more they stay the same. Everything has changed, but at the end of the day, a guy can still put on a pair of blue jeans, whatever boots he has, whatever cheap bow he's got, and go find a piece of timber somewhere to sit in. Boom, we got fireworks going off, and go sit in the timber somewhere and go try to kill a deer. That has not changed, right? That is still available for a person. And you don't need any of the stuff, to go out and enjoy that and have that experience. But if you listen to shows like this one, right, or any other one out there, and you hear the hosts talk and you hear the guests talk, they'll talk about all these things that are kind of adjacent to it to a degree, right? Mm-hmm. Or that helped them, achieve X, Y, or Z. And what you were saying earlier, where when you hear the messages often enough, they kind of become true. You got to be careful what you tell yourself, because your brain will ultimately start to believe it, right? It's like if you're an athlete and you're getting ready to go into a tournament or something like that, and you tell yourself, I can't beat this guy, I can't beat this guy, I can't beat this guy. Well, guess what? You can't beat this guy. You've already made it okay in your mind that you can't. And if you listen over time that the only way to kill these deer is you got to name them, you got to have a manicured 120 acres, you've got to have a feeder, you've got to run cell cameras, you got to put corn out with a drone so you don't put scent down, you got to, you know what I mean? You hear this stuff over and over again, you start to believe these are the ways, right? Whether you agree with any of them or not is not that notwithstanding. The reality of it is it's a way, right? But you have to kind of think about, is that the way that I want to do it? If I wasn't on social media and I wasn't looking forward to posting that grip and grin, and no one else was going to see it except if I had a Polaroid and my uncle, my dad, and my grandpap were going to see it, would I be doing all these things still? Right? And if the answer is no, then you don't need any of that shit. Right. And that to me is like, I think the more kind of how I started thinking about it was that, you know, and I've talked about this on the podcast, like there was a time where having this show was made hunting miserable for me. And I almost stopped doing it entirely because I couldn't figure out how to enjoy it and still do the show. Right. Because I felt like people were expecting something from me that I just didn't really want to, I didn't care if I gave them that or not. Right. Not in terms of content, but I didn't care if like I killed a deer that year. Like I wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it. And I had to ask myself that question of like, if I didn't have the show, would I be doing some of the stuff that I'm doing? And my answer to some of it was no. Right. And so I was like, well, then that's all the stuff I need to cut out. Like if some of this stuff is only happening because I feel compelled, because I feel pressure, because of what someone else might think, then those are absolutely the things I need to remove. And so that's what I started doing. And then lo and behold, I started enjoying it. I started enjoying doing the podcast again. I started enjoying hunting like more than I ever had, you know? And so I think that's a really good question. If you think your experience is starting to get watered down, ask yourself why you do it. And if you think you figured out why you do it, then ask yourself, if that is true, do I do any of the things that I do for that recognition, whatever that why is, right? And if the why is not the right one, like that is like grounded in like your ethos, your ethics, and your moral compass, then you need to change your why, and you probably need to get rid of most of the stuff.
Dude, mic drop. Let's end it right there. No, in all seriousness, like you have no idea how big of a man it takes to give that statement. Someone who is in the industry, who is looked at as a figure of power, a figure of influence, to come out and say some of the things that I've done inside the industry changes the way that I hunt, and I needed to stop doing them because it was no longer enjoyable. Like, dude, people don't say that shit, man. Kudos to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was just the truth of the matter, right? Because I mean, I'll just give you an example, you know, was, you know, I worked with a saddle company for a lot of years, and those guys are great guys, you know, we want to say that first and foremost, but I was really enjoying like hunting off the ground more. Like I enjoyed that mobile, but there was a part of me when I would go out to hunt that I almost felt like I was compelled to get into a tree because I worked with that particular company. Right. And so I would try to figure out a way to get into a tree, even though I knew it wasn't the right one, because if it came down to it and I killed something, I didn't want to be a liar and say that I used the saddle when I didn't. Right. And so I had some setups that probably weren't right. Right. Because of that. Right. And I'd just be a little off or whatever the case was. And I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. You know, it was like I was just going out to hunt. Right. But it was always in the back of my mind, you know. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I don't want to hunt that. If that means I can't work with so-and-so anymore, then I just can't work with so-and-so anymore. Right. And just full transparency, they never told me that I could or I couldn't. It wasn't like they placed that on me. So I want to be clear about that. It wasn't like a requirement of a relationship or anything like that. But it was just, I felt that way. Right. And so it was just, I had to evaluate what I was doing and why I was doing it. And then, you know, and then that's when I realized like nobody cares. Nobody cares if I killed him swimming down the river. You know what I mean? Like,
and
nobody gives a shit. What's that? And my Python boots.
And the river and your Python boots.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or trying to kill a deer that you had on camera because he was on camera. Right? Like that was another thing, right? It was like trying to like only try to kill a deer that's on camera because I have him on camera. Right? And it was those things where I was like, yeah, if I'm doing it for those reasons, then it's not the right ones. And then I either need to stop doing this altogether or I need to remove that part of it, you know? And so I just removed that part of it, and lo and behold, I started enjoying it again, you know? So I don't think about, I need pictures for this, or I need, you know, whatever the case is, like to keep so-and-so. And that's honestly like why I don't post a lot on social about that stuff anymore, because if I happen to get a photo of something while I'm out, great. Right. But it's not like it's the thing that's stirring the drink, you know, and it took me a little while to figure that out.
Yeah. I've been in that same scenario, not so much the way that I hunt, but the objective I step into the woods with or the timber
Mhm.
with of like, yeah, I'm going out to scout, but I also need to get 17 B-roll clips
Mhm.
of trail cameras, or I need to have 17 photos of a topographical map and my boot. Like, I feel like we've all been there and done that because, well, there's two ways to look at it. But one is, I think people want to have influence because they see that as a presence of stature or status,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
within the community. I think that's like, again, fairly normal, right or wrong. And then there's also, I guess you could flip that 180 degrees. And I think this is something that you wanted to talk about was like, I'm not quite sure why they want that influence over others. I think sometimes there are people who want to make a better impact with that influence. And there's probably the opposite of that is probably true as well. But I think it boils down to, I think people understand when you have other folks' attention, you also have power in some capacity. Like the root of monetization always comes to attention. And I think that probably trickles into like the role of content and wanting validation from your peers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think early on, when people first start something, I think that they usually get into with the best intention because it's fun, right? Or they just want to spend more
Right.
time doing the
Yeah.
thing, whatever that thing is. Um, but I think over time, if you happen to be good at it, right, or people will pay attention or whatever, then you start to think about, well, how could I do it more? Right? Well, I can do it more
Yeah.
if more people pay attention. Right. And so it's just like this vicious little cycle. Like I had to actually kind of nip this a little bit for myself when recently, actually, because one of the things that I also love outside of bow hunting, whitetails, is I love jujitsu. I don't think anyone who listens to this for any amount of time knows about it because I get plenty of messages for people telling me they don't want to hear me talk about jujitsu. Right. But the I had this idea around doing something similar to what I do here, but in the jiu-jitsu space, right? And I had to stop myself. And it was a lot of the lessons I learned from this show, really, that I had to kind of stop myself and go, why am I doing that? Like, why do I want to do that? I'm not going to train any better. It's not going to necessarily make me any better at jiu-jitsu per se. It's like I consume jiu-jitsu content just like I consume hunting content. But I'm going to get better by going and training and listening and taking the coaching, right? Not by creating a podcast or whatever the case is, right? And so I kind of had to ask myself why. And it honestly came back to like, I just want to be more entrenched in the community, right? But then again, like, well, why do you want to do that, right? And every time I would ask the why, I would give myself some bullshit answer, right? But whenever it got right down to it, was that it started off with like, I just want to do it more. Right. But I know what that more turns into. Right. It turns into, okay, well, now people pay attention. How do I do it more than I'm doing it now? Right. And if you're not careful, it turns into doing it kind of for the wrong reasons to a degree. Right. And my intention wasn't necessarily to help people per se. It was because I wanted something. And the difference between when I started this and whenever in considering starting something for jiu-jitsu was that when I started this, it was because I was somewhat new back from from Florida, didn't know anybody who hunted, and was getting back into it after being away from it for roughly 10 years. And I knew no hunters. And my way to meet people was like, I bet if I create a podcast, I could probably get people to talk to me. That was it. Right. And so it was really just about me trying to figure out how to meet some people and learn some stuff, and maybe other people would be able to learn too at the same time. Right. Fast forward that to like the what I was going through with considering doing something, adding something else to my plate was like, were my altruistic as they were when I started this? And my answer was no. My answer was like, no, I think I want something out of this more than I'm going to give. And so for that reason, I was like, I don't think I should do it. Yeah. It's a wise old man in the mountains that I met in a parking lot gave me this piece of advice. And I think I shared it after I was hunting that big deer, and I use it a lot, not just for hunting. He was married for a long time. He's widowed now. And, I think he was married for like 50 or 60 years. And I asked him, how do you do that for that long? And I think this is with anything, right? That we hold sacred and that we want to keep around and we want to preserve. And he said, never take more than you give. And that was his only advice. After like 50 some years of marriage, it was like, never take more than you give. And so I think like when you think about hunting or anything else, the experience, if it's used singularly, think about your hunting experience and ask yourself the question, have I given to the hunting experience more than I've taken? And if the answer is you've taken more by trying to cut corners or remove friction, I'm not saying you can't remove some friction points. Some of them you need to get over a hump, right? But if like everything you're doing is looking to remove a friction point, then you're probably taking more than you're giving, right? And so that would just be a litmus test that I would use.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think if you had to, I know this is not the point of these conversations is for it not to be binary, right? Like these aren't yes, no, right, left,
they're complicated,
up, down,
man.
right?
Yeah.
Questions, right? But if you, again, remove our echo chamber, our social circle, because I do think that you're right. I think the folks that we communicate with aren't the normal average, not even upper tier average guys. I think like if you separate the demographic, it's, top 15%. Like this is what we live for. This is our passion. If you had to boil it down for the rest of the folks, the other 85% of hunters, in a binary answer, do you think whitetail hunting today is watered down compared to, let's just go a decade ago, or maybe 2 decades ago, and then maybe 3 decades ago?
I think, man, that's tough. Put me on the spot. I would have to say yes. I think it is. I think, and I don't think it's, and I say that not in an accusatory way either. So I just want to make that clear. I think that we've watered it down for the masses to a degree, somewhat out of, I don't want to say necessity, but how
fear.
Because well, no, I think the thing is that when you think about doing studies or tests and things like that, like a scientific setting or like a research setting or whatever the case is, like you always have your leading metrics and your lagging metrics, right? And your leading metrics are always like more the health of things, right? And your lagging metrics are really kind of like what happens because of the health of things, right? Or to put it in layman's terms, a canary in the mine shaft, right? Put a canary in a mine shaft that doesn't come out, guess what? There's toxic gas in there and it's going to kill you, right? And so I don't think hunting is watered down because we were like, you know what? Let's water this shit down. Shit's too hard. I can't kill any deer. I want it easier. I don't think people sat around and that wasn't, that was the case. And that was what happened. I think that how hunting is changing is a lagging metric to how the world around it is changing. And it is a symptom of the changes, is how I would kind of think about it. To where if you go back, just say when you and I were kids, and this is the example I usually use. Talking to my buddy East Coast Stickbow, right? And shout out to him, such a good dude. Anytime I talk to him, he laughs now that his wife makes fun of him because when they're driving, he lives in Jersey. when they're driving, every property they pass, he says, I remember that when that was a farm. I remember that when that was a farm. I remember when that was a farm, right? And now it's all developments, gas stations, strip malls, etc. Right? And so when we were growing up, to sound like the old man on Get Off My Lawn, but just don't even say when we were growing up. Take 30 years ago or 20 years ago, even. I know when I was a kid that I could walk out my back door and hunt we had a back 40, but even if we didn't have a back 40, every farmer that we lived around would let me hunt their property whenever I wanted to. Didn't matter. Right. And so I had that access to it. And so I could go out and just do it for fun. And I could do it as soon as I got home from school. My dad go out as soon as he got home from work, whatever the case was. It wasn't like you had to drive 40 minutes to get somewhere where you're allowed to hunt. Right. And so I think that's changed, right? People just don't live adjacent to the places that they can hunt. And so their time becomes more precious. And so what do people do? They try to maximize their time, right? Well, what happens then, right? Well, then you start using map apps, right? So you know exactly where you're going. You're doing your e-scouting in advance. So you're not wasting time when you're out. Like, right, time is the thing, right? They're using cell cameras so they can see what's happening. So they don't have to go change batteries and take time away to go do X because they live an hour away from where they're hunting or whatever the case is. You also have that there's not as much access. And then in addition to that, even just like 30 years ago, you used to be able to, like my hometown, you could get a job and like live a decent life, right? But like now getting a decent job around there is almost next to impossible. Like you have to almost move away and move to more suburban and urban centers, especially for certain careers. Like you have to, right? There's just no other way to cut it, right? And so it's just and it's not a unique or localized thing. It's the urbanization of the country overall. Like it's happened over time. Like it first started happening during post-industrial US, right? Whenever they started making factories and building cars and stuff like that, right? Like all that stuff kind of happened, and it's just like it's just gotten more and more and more and more and more over time, right? And so now you have more people who maybe hunt, who are living in these areas now, who are yet further away from the places that they can hunt. So now time becomes even more of a commodity, right? And so I sometimes wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, but I sometimes wonder if some of these willingness, I don't want to say the willingness, the desire to remove the friction points isn't a desire to water down the experience, but it's a desire to maximize time. Right? To where it's like the byproduct is that they're watering the experience down potentially, but it's because if I don't, right, reduce these friction points, I'm going to have next to no experience or a terrible experience, right? And so I wonder if that's like why people do it. I don't know. I'm just thinking, right? Like these things aren't binary, but I think because of those things, I think less because of hunting related things. I think more because of, I think the hunting watering down for like 85% of people isn't the disease, it's the symptom. And I think the disease is just overall like the evolution of how society works and where we live and how we have to live, right? To make ends meet or to get ahead or, however you want to qualify that.
No. I think I can have a little bit of self-reflection with that statement and say that's 1,000% true. When I think about the friction points that I want to remove from my hunting and my hunting experience, it boils back to time. How can I achieve or be more efficient with time? Some of it's being properly prepared, but a lot of it ties into what advanced tools can I use to alleviate some of the work, aka friction points, to make that time more valuable, essentially, more efficient, more effective. But I think so. I totally.
But is efficient a better experience?
Not always. No. Not always. No.
My best experiences were the least efficient. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I've had efficient ones too, but my best experiences were the least efficient ones.
So again, going back to your point about wanting to feel the work, wanting to feel the suck, however you want to frame that up. My second elk hunt, you know, I killed a bull like 8 miles from a trailhead. I rode a dirt bike for 20 minutes from camp by myself to get to the trailhead, and then hiked 3 miles in, and then followed a herd 5. And this is like, I'm not exaggerating here, 5 miles back to a bedding area, like rainstorm across the creek. I was naked trying to dry clothes. You know the whole story, right?
Yeah.
So kill this bull, and my hunting partner, I drop him a pin. He gets there and he's like, man, like we ought to just try to find some horses or something to get this thing out of here. Like this is going to be bad. And I looked at him and said, I trained for 6 effing months for this. I want to feel the pain. I want every ounce of it. So I think some of it, you know, boils down to, again, your mindset of expectations of what you want, what you want from that. Before we move on though, I want to make a point. I agree with you 1,000% that it's less of a disease. And I do agree that hunting as a whole, if we're speaking in generalities, is watered down. So I think that we're on the same page there. And I do agree it's not necessarily the disease, it's the symptom. But I also think when I interjected there and said fear for just a minute, I'm not sure if that picked up on my mic or not. I think that we are so fearful of losing hunters and losing the right to hunt and losing access and losing the resource that the mentality over the last 15 years is, oh my gosh, let's hold on to this thing any way we can. We need to draw in as many new people and keep as many new people and retain and reactivate as many new people. Let's give them all the options that they can have.
Right.
And again, like to the point of this conversation, I don't think the easiest, smallest amount of friction is always the best thing. Like, and it's like, if somebody really doesn't value it, if someone really doesn't want to put the work in, maybe those aren't the people that we want to have as whitetail hunters.
Yeah. It's the old quality over quantity, right? And I get totally what you're saying, right? Like they're thinking of it from, when I say they, it's just like in general, right? It's not like we're not, and again, I want to caveat this whole conversation with like, we're not pointing blame anywhere. We're not saying we haven't figured out any better than anybody else does. You know, we're talking about these things, like people should sit and should sit with it themselves and think about some of these things, right? Because just for no other reason that I think it's just a good exercise to do. But I think you're right. I think that people were fearful that we're going to have, you know, numbers decline, et cetera, you know, or continue to decline, whatever you believe the numbers are, that they're willing to, potentially, and I say potentially because we don't know, make some poor judgments or some poor decisions in an effort to keep those people around that are on the fringe or to entice them to come further in. And so maybe we are degrading it for those who are going to be left standing, you know, whenever those fair weather folks aren't around any longer. Right. It's the old adage of like, you know, like we've all seen it where, you know, a band, you know, all of a sudden wants to change. It's like, hey, we're this, right? And all of a sudden we're going to make a record because, you know, we don't like, I'll just call the dude out. And not that he would ever listen to the show, but Tyler Childers, right? Liked his first record, right? I was like, oh, that's great. And then all of a sudden he got weird and I'm like, yeah, I'm out, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like you forgot who your fans were. You forgot who the people brought you on the come up, right? Who supported you, right? And it's kind of like, he's probably bigger than he's ever been. But like, I just use that as like a personal example of a person who I was like, oh yeah, dig his first record, like really good, right? And then he got all weird about things, and I was like, yeah, man, you can have some like different beliefs than me, but like I don't need to hear you preach about it, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and I was like, I was out, right? So that's the same kind of thing with hunting that we're doing. It's like you have these core people, and as you continue to add people on the periphery by, you know, accepting or endorsing peripheral elements that maybe aren't core to hunting and maybe shouldn't be core to the experience, whatever that means, you run the risk of those people who are semi-engaged eventually not being engaged because they weren't really part of you to begin with, your DNA. And you also run the risk of running the people off who are very core to your DNA or to your mission or whatever the case is, right? People smarter than me have to figure that stuff out. It's like, but it's one of those marketing 101 things. Like, you stand for something or you stand for nothing, right? That's essentially how it is. But the one thing I want to turn to here is we've talked a little bit about what things can be watered down and how things might water it down. And we agree that, like, yes, I think in general, like, we have watered it down to a degree. The nice thing is that each of us can kind of choose our own destiny. And so it doesn't have to be watered down for any one person because they can do whatever it is they want to do, use whatever it is they want to use, have the experience they want to have. But, what are some of the things that can't be watered down? Because there's always those things like, take football or basketball. Like we just watched Indiana win a national title, right? And Cignetti is a great example of like, man, you can do whatever you want to do. You can buy the most expensive players and all the 5 stars you want. But at the end of the day, there are some fundamental things of football that just matter that are intangible, right? I mean, there's the fundamental things of like great coaching. There's the fundamental things of blocking, tackling, scheme, right? That are just like, you do those things really well and you got a shot. And then there's those other things that are leadership, togetherness, team building, fighting for the guy next to you, right? Like all those things that you can't measure, right? I would say is why Indiana won a national title, because when you look across the line at those guys, man, like Miami had a lot more NFL bodies than Indiana did, right? And so it doesn't matter how things change around you. There's always things that you can't skirt, right? That are core to the experience. So what are some of those things like that you think that can't be watered down?
Dude, you already said, like, it's the foundation of deer hunting. It's it's your woodsmanship, it's your scouting, being able to read sign, being able to not just read sign. I think when people talk about woodsmanship, it's sign. But there's also an element of woodsmanship of just being able to be in the timber or in nature. And
how about this? Being still. Like not still as in not moving, but like being able to be still in a place. Dude, and just absorbing.
I struggle with it. Yeah, being still. But it's present, like you can walk into the woods. You can walk into the woods. Like right now, I think pretty much of the Midwest, Northeast is snow covered, right? It's frigid cold. You walk into the woods and you see snow on one side of a tree. Like there's a lot of people that don't even pay attention to that. Like it's telling you where the predominant wind and how that storm rolled in and like where are things going to seek shelter. And it's just like all these little things that people talk about woodsmanship. It's always sign, right? That's part of it. But to your point, like it's the foundation of deer hunting. It's woodsmanship. It's being able to read sign. It's being able to read woods, not just deer, also other critters that are running around too. Mm-hmm. Like how are all the other critters using the woods? Waterways, like it's just being freaking outside, being a caveman, the Neanderthal, getting a little bit of that going. I think all of that is foundational. It's knowing your archery equipment. How proficient are you? Understanding, man, this is tough. Like understanding kill zone opportunities. Mm-hmm. Of like being able to read body language, when to draw, when not to draw. Like you can't, like, dude, that shit is the stuff that doesn't get watered down because you can't learn it unless you go do it and screw it up and have the friction point and think about it in your head. Oh man, like maybe I should have waited to draw when that deer was behind that tree, or maybe I should have drew when he was at 50 before he was inside the kill bubble. Like you can't. Can you coach it? Maybe a little bit. Can you think about it beforehand? Yeah, of course, a little bit.
Yeah, you can frame your mind in the right way, right? But it still doesn't execute it. Yeah.
No, it's like to your point, it's drawing the scheme on the whiteboard or in a playbook and then going out and lining up and getting a helmet underneath your chin. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So
if you're Mendoza, you ball out.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so you have those foundational skills, right? But then there's also an element of like your circle. Like, you're my boy. Cameron's my boy. Like that camaraderie and the relationships that we have and the conversations we have. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on outside of our ecosystem in the world. Like, you're not going to water down our opinions. You're not going to water down our thoughts. You're not going to water down our conversations, and you're not going to water down the experiences that we have together while we're hunting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah, man, 100%. Like the one thing there's one thing you and I talk about a lot that I think is part of what you can't water down. Like if you're a person who's looking to remove those friction points, that I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And that is, making bad calls or making mistakes and then owning them, right? Like that's not a friction. Like if you make bad choices and you just pretend like they didn't happen, like you're destined to do it again. And that's part of, like, to me, that's part of hunting. That's a friction point that you can't get any better unless you face that. Like, unless you kind of, I don't want to say own those things, but, own them, right? Like you have to be able to kind of look at them and be like, man, I screwed this up. I think the other thing you and I have talked about that is important that you can't water down is you're either willing to sit in things that are like uncertain, right? Or you're not, right? Like, I don't think you can like scheme your way or technology your way out of that, right? Like walking into scenarios where that's ambiguous, right? Like, cause you never know, like a great example is whenever I was chasing that big deer, right? Like I had to, in my mind, put some certainty around what I was doing because like the whole hunt was ambiguous. He was such a ghost. I knew he was there, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. And I was always a day behind and $1 short, right? And there's nothing that was going to change that other than just my willingness to be able to just sit in uncertainty for as long as I had to try to make it happen, right? Like that's something that you can't water down. And I think at the end of the day, like most things, and again, like for me, there's a big parallel, for jiu-jitsu or just like jiu-jitsu, that eventually the woods or the mat will eventually punish you for taking shortcuts. Like you're eventually going to get got, right? On the mat, you might be able to skirt it for a little while, right? Like you might have not put in all your work, but maybe you're just stronger than everybody, right? And so you're beating people up because you're stronger, but your technique sucks, right? Or whatever the case is. Eventually, you're going to get got, because you're eventually going to find a person who is either as strong or just has better technique. And I'm not saying you don't use strength. Strength's a component of athletics, right? So, I get that, right? But if that's your only game, eventually you're going to find someone who's got better technique and is just better, and it ain't going to matter, and you're going to get got. Just like in the woods, that if you're using a corn pile as like, I'm going to use a drone and drop 100 pounds of corn and I'm going to hunt this corn, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't kill this deer. It's like, well, the reason why you can't kill this deer is because he figured out that you're there, right? Because you keep going to the corn pile. You know what I mean? It's like, Greg Listener would be a good one to talk to about that, right? Because he sees it all the time. Like all you need to do is look at the browse line around the corn, right? And it's like, and eventually they start waiting until dark or whatever the case is, right? And so I think shortcuts sometimes are good. Like if there's something you're trying to get over and that you just need to learn something, right? Or I need to figure this piece out and like maybe I can circumvent it to get to this section, but eventually you're going to have to come back and learn it. Like that's the way this stuff works, right? And so, to me, it's like you're best just kind of learning it to start, and not watering things down and, taking your lumps just like everybody else does. Because in the long run, I think I think it gives you a better experience. And I think ultimately you become, a better hunter overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Those friction points turn into transferable skill sets in a lot of places. And I think that's like you've talked about that, about going to the prairie and wanting to hunt a different place and expanding your skill set to be able to go hunt different places and recall on those friction points and how I overcame it and how I thought about that circumstance or that scenario. So yeah, man.
I mean, I think if you just think back to like whatever interest somebody has outside of hunting, anybody who was really good at something consistently, you know, like, and you look at their story, it's filled with adversity and challenges, and you never hear the person who was consistently good at something talk about all the shortcuts they had.
Well, because
they don't exist.
You're 1,000% right. But again, the perception of what a shortcut is, I think, is where, like, the lens that we look at this stuff through is what throws everyone off. Because there's guys that will throw shade and hate at, let me just grab somebody. Lee Lakosky. Okay. Well, if I had a 1,000-acre farm and had 50-acre food plots, I'd kill 200-inch deer too. Well, no one knows all the hardship that he went through to obtain 1,000 acres. Quit his job, moved to Iowa. You know what I mean? Like, he suffered through a portion of his life to be able to have that opportunity and learn those skill sets to implement on a 1,000-acre farm with 20 acres of food. So it's like,
yeah,
it's tough, man.
That's a good point. Cause like what we're saying here isn't, this isn't a conversation of haves and have nots, right? That's not what we're doing here, because there's different ways to put in the hard work, right? Lee Lakosky is a good example. Dude, this is how out of touch I am. I can't even think of their names now. Like the biggest people in deer hunting, and I don't remember their name.
Mark and Terry.
Yeah, there you go. Drury's. Jeez, dude, can you believe I actually forgot their names? Like, not just their first names, I forgot their last name. Like, that's how like disconnected I am, right? The same thing with those guys, right? But man, they worked their tail off to have that stuff. They just worked a different way, and so it's just, I don't discount their success, and I don't think they circumvent. Like they might, they might remove some friction in certain areas, but they applied plenty of friction in other areas to be able to remove that friction, right? So they removed the friction of like pressure and not knowing where the deer might come from, et cetera, but they implemented the friction of having to be fiscally responsible and figure out a way to make the money that they needed to make to buy their first farm, to turn it into a second farm, to turn it into a third, right? Like that's not removing friction. That is replacing friction, right? And so this episode isn't intended to kind of throw shade on anybody like that, because that's not what we're really talking about. But I think the last thing, man, is that, to a degree, in order to help people have the richest experience that they can, I think it's the responsibility somewhat of experienced hunters to like model things the right way, making sure we're highlighting the right things, right? Like you and I talk about a lot is like we highlight the process and not the goal or the outcome, right? Making sure that that's the thing that's like gets people excited, right? Like I'm stoked right now because this is one of my favorite times of year. Like I love to get out in the woods this time of year, partially because there's no pressure. I don't have to carry a bow, right? And so it's not like I got to be super quiet and do all the right things. It's like I can just kind of tear through the woods and like explore, right? And I love that part of the season. And so highlighting those types of things and making sure people realize that that's like, man, that's where the real value is, not just from learning deer hunting, but just the overall experience. Like it's all of it, right? It's not just a couple months out of the year you get to carry a bow. And whenever you prioritize those things, like I think that's whenever it's not watered down, right? Is whenever you're doing all those, what I'll say is like, what I always tell my daughter, it's not the work you're willing to do while people are watching. It's the work that you're willing to do when no one's watching. That's what matters. Right. And so, this time of year is the work that nobody's watching, so I would say, fill your cup this time of year because it's a great time to fill it.
Yeah, man. The result is a distraction. Those who find success are obsessed with the process.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, did we beat this up well enough? I think we covered a lot of ground. We probably pissed some people off. Apologies in advance for that. Send all your hate mail to Chad Sylvester, Instagram,
gmail.com.
Awesome, brother. Well, let people know, where can people find you? What are you doing these days? Are you on Instagram? Are you posting stuff, or are you just coaching basketball?
Stuff. No, just coaching basketball. That's it, man. Trying to lead these little hellions that I got, man. They're crazy.
Nice. Well, they got the right man for the job.
Yeah. Maybe. Thanks. I appreciate that. That was a pat on the back.
There you go. I'll give you a little pat. I appreciate you, brother, man. You be good, and we'll talk soon.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tacticam, Osseo Gear, Hawk Optics, Face Off E-Bikes, and Lathrop & Sons Boot Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.